Good evening. My name is Summer, and I am a real alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendium's Spiritual Life is Not a Theory. We are here tonight in the middle of We Agnostics. We are covering we're starting with page 52 with the Bedevilments, and I am here with a special guest, Kathy E. She was actually the second guest to be on our Friday night study way back when, and I think this is her third time. So we hold her very dear to our heart, and she's a good friend of mine. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, Kathy, we'd love to hear from you. And if you want to just give a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you so much, Summer. I can't believe it. I hope it's third time lucky. My name is Kathy. I'm an alcoholic. My home group is the Big Book Comes Alive workshop. We meet online on Sundays, and I have that's my home group. I have a Friday date, which is March 13th, 2016. And it is such an honor to be here with you tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. So glad to see all your smiling faces. If you want to turn on your video, it makes it a little bit more interactive for us. We can see the nodding and the thumbs up, or if you just want to put hearts up, that's fine too. I'm so glad you made it, Marty. I've been reminding you Friday night, so here you are in the flesh. Awesome. All right. So, Kathy, I'm going to start with we had to ask ourselves, and then we'll go from there, okay? All right. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. Now, I kind of strategically went back a little bit just to kind of cover, and we don't really do a review because we hope that we all continue and we're here every night. And if you're not, then we can catch up on the recording. We want to just move forward, but I went backwards a little bit because I think this is really important. This is a description, like a wonderful description. It is called the bedevilments of our spiritual malady, like where we're at when we're separated from that conscious contact with our higher power. And that feeling when you're like, oh, what's going on? This is a great place to point sponsees to for us to look and do a self-evaluation. Like, am I having problems with personal relationships? Am I having trouble controlling my emotions? So it's like a self-check. And it's just like the spiritual malady, like in writing. So I'd love to hear what you have to say in detail about it, Kathy. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Thanks, Summer. Yeah, I keep thinking of the word when you're reading this, like bittersweet, because when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, like dry, like sober, dry without a drink, like I had no idea when people asked me, Kathy, like, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And I had no words. I just knew I was so, so uncomfortable inside of myself. And then they would ask me things like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, that's the worst thing to ask me. I'm an alcoholic. But when someone brought me to this page, a woman that I was told to go and ask for help for a sponsor, she said, after my big long story, read page 52. And I read page 52 and my mouth dropped. But I say it's bittersweet because for me, it really affirmed to me that I was in the right place because I heard people getting shiny and happy and very grateful in sobriety. And none of those things were happening for me at 6 months sober because I didn't treat what I have, which is this unmanageability, which is these traits of untreated alcoholism. I never heard about them by coming to meetings. And I was thinking also when you're reading them as well that like I don't know I have this spiritual malady until I read these and see that these are the manifestations of the illness that I have. This is the manifestations of my unmanageable life, like because drinking took all of this away until it didn't when alcohol stopped working. And I love on the previous page it talks about leaving aside the drink crashed me tell why life was so unsatisfactory. I couldn't live life. And like then I hear you live life on life's terms. I'm like, what is that? I tried that. That ends up with me
Mhm.
drinking or
Yeah.
wanting to take my life. And the checklist here, I most certainly don't live on this page today. Do I have some of these some days? Absolutely. I that's why I live in 10, 11, and 12. But I had all of these on me when I got here without a solution. And I also have a couple of notes here, so I'll do them really quickly. But we were having trouble with personal relationships. That's the physical dimension of my illness. And we couldn't control our emotional nature. That's my mind. It was a prey to misery and depression. Again, my mind, the mental, I couldn't make a living. A feeling of uselessness. And I was full of fear and I were unhappy, couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Absolutely 100%. And isn't it more important that I find a solution to these human problems that everyone else has, except that I'm alcoholic, I have this physical allergy to alcohol and this mental twist that sends me back because I'm living here in this. And once I start in that cycle, I can't get off it, like the doctors describe in the doctor's opinion. So yeah, it's bittersweet, but I love these and they're a great checklist, like you said. That's all I have.
Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, I love that you touched on the unmanageability because it's the second part of the first step, right? Like I thought my life was unmanageable because I got DUIs and my house was a mess and all this stuff, but it's the internal condition that's going on. That's my unmanageability. And I love that it says it's our human problems. Why shouldn't we apply to our human problems? This isn't our problems with a higher power or when our higher powers in our life. This is our human self-will run riot problems. This is our life run on self-will. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to keep reading. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Okay, I know it's a small paragraph, but real quick, like we had if when we saw others, when we saw people in meetings, and when I see Kathy, and when I see, Robbie and Howard and all of you guys, to be quite honest, when I see you all, solving your problems based on a simple reliance, like when we hear like, well, have you prayed about it, or have you, done inventory, or what would God say, or those simple things that we apply to our life. When I saw how happy you all were and how you were getting past those problems, like that part of the third step prayer, um it was like I had to, I had to make a decision. Was I had to stop doubting. I guess that's what it is. I had to put my old ideas about God and about how much God cared for me and about myself and my relationship with God aside, because my ideas and my preconceived notions and my prejudices and my um what's the word I'm looking for? I guess prejudices weren't working. My old ideas weren't working, although I thought they were. I thought that I was getting along just fine on myself, even though I wasn't. But guess what does work? The God idea. Kathy?
Thanks, Summer. I love this paragraph. It is so small, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so meaty, like, and you know, excuse me, the person I seen solve their problems by this simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, uppercase reference to God, as we know, those little pronouns are so many of them, was the woman that took me through this book. And I always think of Abby, fresh skinned and glowing. There's something about, I think he says something about his eyes. I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
butchered that. But there was something about this woman. She wasn't dead inside. And I remember looking at her going, you have the same things that you've did the same things that I've did. You know how I feel, and there's something different in you. Like I couldn't doubt that. That was right on front of me, and clearly I was desperate. Um, And I don't know about you guys, but I'm the kind of alcoholic. I think of spirit of the universe, and I'm like, come on, throw me a freaking bone. Like it has to be some big, great thing. Like when people would give little acronyms in meetings as well, I'm like, come on, like I'm not in kindergarten. That's the mentality I came in here with. But I'm telling you, alcohol beat me into a state of reasonableness. And then you talk about self, well, that was next. Like I didn't have a bone to chew on. And so I had to stop doubting the power of God in that woman's life and the people that were recovered and the people that were doing this work and knew what they're talking about. Our ideas did not work. Like my self-will, my idea did not work. Like any way I tried to get, manage my life, get well, deal with my human problems did not work. My own power did not work. But I love this sentence and it's so small and I feel like I could just go on about it. But the God idea did. And where we are on page 52, like I love this chapter because I'm learning constantly. It blows my mind. We agnostics, it's mystical, and there's so many people in this meeting that can speak so much better on this chapter than me because it really floors me. It's so mystical because I learn something all the time, and there's so much argument about why I should believe. There's so much here for me. Like my ideas don't work. Do they work, Kathy? No. Look at my life. But what about the God idea? It doesn't say God works. It says, what about that God idea? And I love that. Is it possible that the God idea could work? Like they're making it so easy for me. They're giving me little breadcrumbs and I love it. So that's all I got.
Wonderful. Thank you for that commentary. That was awesome. All right, and you were exactly right about Ebby, and I think about that saying that the eyes are a lamp or, the window to our soul. Like when you look in someone's eyes, it's like we can tell about their soul, right? And they don't have to have blue or green or, those types of eyes. You can have brown or anything. You can just see their wide eye when they walk in. And when Ebby walked in, I can just picture it. I'm a very visual person. I can picture him coming to the door and like his eyes being bright and his face being shiny and bright. And like, yes, that's awesome that you brought that up. Okay, I'm going to keep reading. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the main spring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the rights would never fly. It's funny. Kathy and Howard and Rob, y'all were at the meeting earlier today, and we talked about this the God sufficiency versus self sufficiency, right? Like self sufficiency doesn't work. It's the God sufficiency, and we see that it works for other people. You know, I'm gonna let you go first this time, Kathy. I just felt led to say something about that. Go right ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build this machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Like the thing here that I was taught about the Wright brothers is because clearly I wasn't alive then, but what I was taught was these Wright brothers had this childish faith. They weren't going with the fact of mathematical minds or scientific minds. They had a childish faith. They were bicycle people and they had this childish faith. And that's what um was was the mainspring of their accomplishment. And like that to me, again, is another argument about how I can have that childish faith. And I give this little example, and I don't mean to ramble, but my nephews and my niece, when I visited them last year in New York City, like they were going to their like baseball practice and like they were ready to go. They hadn't their dinner yet. They sat down with their backpacks on and these baseball bats in the back. And I'm thinking, they need to chill out a bit. But they had this childish faith that they were going to go and play their game. They're seven. and eat your old. They weren't thinking about, oh my gosh, like I wonder is that guy, that kid gonna be there? How I'm gonna perform? How, like they were like, yeah, we got this. We're gonna go and do this. They have this childish faith. And like I borrow that. I borrowed that. I looked at them and I was like, that's what I need to have more of that. Um, but I love this part you're talking about, sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems, that my human power will solve my problem. Not relieve, like the drink problem has been left aside. It's my human problems. That I'm sticking to my human power, um, that I'll be able to solve my own problems. Like that self will, when you guys show me that God's sufficiency worked with you. Yeah, I began to feel like those who insisted the Wright brothers and the Wrights would never fly. I began to feel like an idiot because you're telling me that the God sufficiency worked, and I'm going, yeah, but I got my own willpower here, So I'm a bit like those who thought the Wright brothers would never fly. And that's where I was when I got here because I have agnosticism temperament. So that's all I got on that.
Awesome. And so did I. And it's agnosticism, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It's without knowledge, right? Like without the knowledge. And I mean, I was filled with that along with all of those old ideas and prejudices and, things that had to be put aside. But I want to piggyback on your description of the kids and having all their stuff prepared to go to the baseball game and like that childlike faith. And I think of it often because I do have two children, and that when they run down the stairs, like, for, let's just say, I mean, I'm thinking birthdays, but let's just say Christmas, and it's like it's expectancy, like they're running down the stairs, with this expectancy that there's going to be something at the bottom under the tree, right? But they're getting all prepared and they just have like all this. I mean, I didn't have to say anything to them. I didn't have to say tomorrow morning there's going to be this and that. Like they know. I mean, yeah, they're old enough to know what date it is, but even when they were younger and stuff, and it was like as we came up to Christmas, and they would just like bolt down and their eyes lit up, and there was just like this faith that they had in this situation. It's like, can't we have a faith like that? I mean, that's what I want. I want to have a childlike faith. All right, so moving on. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance. We were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. Kathy, it's all yours. You're first. Go ahead.
Wow. What a long paragraph. Logic is great stuff. I really believed that when I got here. I loved it. I was like, thank you. You're giving me another breadcrumb here. You're making this really easy, because that's how I operated when I got here, is like logic is this power to reason and draw conclusions. So if I can't comprehend something, then it's not true to me. And when I got here, that's the thinking I had. So I was like, all right, they're giving me a bit of a break here. Um, and so they go on to tell me about that we agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to a reasonable approach and interpretation. And like I love that it also goes on to say that we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense to believe, because I'm tortured here when I'm here on page 53. And the solution that I did not know was a solution until I came and you guys told me that it was actually my solution. Alcohol doesn't work. So it makes sense for me to believe, because I'm powerless. It didn't mean I didn't have fight in me, but my back is to the wall. that was my concession. And so it makes sense that I need power. And that question on page, I think it's 46, do I believe or am I willing to believe? It was made it so simple when I was like, or am I even willing to believe that there's a higher power? And I was like, I'll go with that. Yeah. And I love that line I'll end on this is like that we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. That is such, I'm using this word, that is such a surrendered place for an alcoholic like me. When I can say or go to my sponsor today, or, you know, perhaps come to something with Howard or a fellow in program, like, I don't know. That's a really good start for me. It really is like, and it's usually after a little bit of pain, so I get surrendered. So that's all I got.
Yeah, definitely after some pain, right? All right. When we became alcoholics, great job, Kathy. Sorry. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is either everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? I love this line. And I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, this is the second part of step two, the proposition, like, that God either is or he isn't. He's either everything or he's nothing, right? And if I can see that there is the possibility of a higher power working in your life, then there has to be something. That means it's everything, right? Because it can't be nothing if I have this little inkling of like, oh, there's a higher power working in Kathy's life. I'm willing to believe that. I'm willing to be willing to believe that, right? So that means that God can't be nothing. So therefore, if this line is true, that God is either everything or he is nothing, then he's everything. God either is or he isn't, right? It makes it just so clear to us. And I love how it ends with this choice. What was our choice to be? Think about that. What is our choice today? Like, obviously, or not obviously, this is part of step two. And so this is a great question to pose while going through step two, but it's also something that on a daily basis we can ask ourselves, what is our choice today? Is either God going to be everything or is God going to be nothing? Is God here with me or is he not? Is God is or he isn't? So that's a choice I can ask myself on a daily basis. I can ask myself on a minute basis, especially when I'm getting like bound up or like blocked up and I'm not, I'm wondering like what's going on? Why do I feel this way? Maybe there's some of those bedevilments creeping in, or I feel a little bit blocked from the sunlight of the spirit. What is my choice today? What is my choice? Kathy?
Yeah, that was great, Summer. Thank you. Just a couple of things I've marked in my book. And you know, when we became alcoholics, I remember reading that and I'm like, oh, I became alcoholic. And yeah, I crossed that line that at some stage
Yes.
in my drinking career, I lost all control of my drinking once I started to drink. Um, Crushed by this self-imposed crisis. So like self-imposed crisis is like my fear, my current way of living is not working. It's not working. Like you give me something in my day and I'm trying to make a decision around it. I will talk about it for 2 hours. I'm in a self-imposed crisis. Self, it's funny, but when I got here, it wasn't funny. And I cannot postpone or evade it. So I can't put off going on. Like I can't keep living the way I'm living because ultimately it's jails, it's institutions, and it's death. I'm doomed, is what they're telling me here. Um, and we had to fearlessly, and like keyword there is fearlessly. Um, and that's a lot to ask of us, I feel. That's a lot to ask of us. They're really making us geared up to something here. Face this proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. And I love this proposition because they're not asking me, Kathy, do you think God is everything or is not? No, they're telling me. And now they're going to ask me, and they followed up, say, God either is or he isn't. Now you make the choice. They're not giving me a question to say, do you think he's everything or nothing? He's like, they're asking me, you choose. What's your choice going to be? And that is a tall order. And I remember getting here and like having to close my book, having to sit with this because I know that like this is the foundation. This from here on in, we're going to be sucking diesel. Like, what is my choice to be? And it packed a punch. But I knew that my current way of living, my self-imposed crisis, again, wasn't wasn't working. So again, like I'm surrendered again and I'm moving forward, trying to be fearless with it all. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. And for those of us that want to know definitions, I just wanted to define the proposition. It's from the Big Book Dictionary, an idea that's put forth as being factual and true. All right, moving on. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. I mean, surrendering all is like the hardest part, right? Go for it, Kathy. You're on.
Oh, this packs a punch. So arrived at this point, I believe to be like what our choice is to be. Like here I am, a self-imposed crisis, or either God is everything or else he is nothing. I'm here at this point. And I have to um be confronted with this question of faith. And like there's plenty of definitions for faith. There's you talk about the 1930s dictionary, and one of them I believe, and I could get it wrong, but is to have a belief in a doctrine, like to be having a belief. Is it possible I can have a belief in these 12 steps? Like that's what I'm looking at here. It's to have blind conviction. But that's why it was shown to me through recovered alcoholics that carried this message, the sponsor that carried this message to me. Like, is there a chance that if I do my homework and do this work, that I can have that too? And I keep referring back to the self-imposed crises. Like, I don't have a lot of wiggle room after that choice, but this question of faith is to have this belief in this 12 steps, this spiritual way of living. Um, and I love these, they give us loads of lovely pronouns here, the Bridge of Reason, New Land, Reason again. But just to touch on them words, the outlines of, let me find my place here. And some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason. So I have this kind of a belief system, you know. Anyway, I walk over that bridge of reason, but it's capital O there. And we see that toward this desired shore of faith, the outlines and the promise of the new land, faith, capital N, capital L, had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out and welcome. We were grateful that reason, self, had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile and we did not like to lose our support. Well, I can tell you when I got here, it wasn't like, all right, let's walk and let's skip and let's hop and let's jump over this bridge. That just wasn't my experience. Like I needed to go through this with belief after making that choice and being willing to move on in the rest of the steps. Like in time, that has came more because I can see how my reason, I can see how self has got in the way. And it's like, I look at this paragraph and I'm like, yeah, like that gotta go. Like I get surrendered more and more and more. But I'm telling you at the start, I wasn't like, whoop-de-doo-dah, let's go over this bridge. But the point I'm making for anyone new is that if that's where you are, then that's enough. That's enough. And that's all I have with this.
Great point, Kathy. That was excellent. I think you covered it absolutely wonderfully. So I'm just going to keep reading. Awesome. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Or did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So, in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. How true is that? I mean, when people tell me, I don't have faith, I don't have any faith. Well, we all have faith in something. Even if we don't have faith in a higher power at the time, we have faith in ourselves. We have faith in, I mean, I never, when someone handed me back in, way back when, if someone handed me a pill, I wasn't like, oh, excuse me, what is this? Who's the maker? What's going on here? No, it was down my throat, or like I wasn't like wondering. I had faith that it was going to work, right? Like I didn't ask any questions. Is this going to hurt my stomach? No, I just took it. And so we had faith in these things, all these things, good and bad, but we definitely had a faith in ourself and our self-sufficiency. Like Kathy was saying, like that self-imposed crisis, was our the selfishness, self-centeredness, that was the root of our troubles. It brought us to that, crisis, but we relied on ourselves. And even when we and, came to a point where everything hit the fan. I was going to say something else, but things hit the fan. Like we still resolutely went back to like relying on ourselves, right? Like even though, it was just like I have faith in myself. I have faith that in people sentiments, I have faith. Faith in people is kind of like codependency, right? Like, we can have faith in people, but unhealthy faith in another human being and putting that in replacing of a higher power is kind of codependency. But we had all sorts of faith going on here, and I'm just kind of like pulling at examples, but it's just funny because I have so many people tell me that they just have no faith, that their faith has been wiped. They're done. They have absolutely no faith. And I like to say you have faith in something, and if you can have that sort of faith in that something, you can have faith in a higher power too. You have the ability to have faith. Kathy, you're on, girl.
Mhm. Kind of like what you said. I'm not going to go too far on because that was great. And but I really love like how at the beginning of this paragraph they said that was natural. Like they're just holding our hands the whole way through this bill. Like they know who they're talking to. Someone like me, an alcoholic self will run riot. They know that I am that we are like him, like clearly, but they're like, it's okay, it's natural. But let us think a little bit more closely. Hadn't we been brought to somewhere by this certain kind of faith? And I asked myself that, yeah, I was brought to where I was by this faith in myself.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you described it wonderfully. In my own reasoning, and reasoning just means the power of the mind to think, understand, form judgments, process like a logic. That's what I have faith in. And it's funny in my book, did we not have confidence in our ability to think? And I wrote, sometimes. Yeah, that's the truth. I still had this mind that I couldn't trust, but I'm telling you, when I was right about something, I was right about it,
Mhm.
and it doesn't make sense. Like this solution does not make sense to my mind. What are you telling me that about all of what we just read? I don't understand. And it's like, no, you don't understand. It's not an intellectual project. But if you do the work, you'll get the experience and you'll be able to show the demonstration. So my mind gets twisted with it a little bit, but he's just giving me a little bit more of like, here, come, check this out. Ask yourself this question. He's given me more argument here. So faith had been involved all along, faith in my self-sufficiency, right? That's all I got.
Thank you, Kathy. And here we go. And then we find out that we also worship things like, oh, I can't worship anything, but we're worshipers of so many different things. So we found two that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? I'll say yes. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower, who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was not, it was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Take it away, Kathy.
Oh, um, I love this. I really love this paragraph. And like you said, yes, I've yes to all of these things. And I love when they say, and then with a better motive, like it's like I'm trying to be morally better about myself, like here. But had we not worshipped these other things, the sunset, the sea, or flower? Absolutely. But this line, who of us had not loved something or somebody? Like loving someone does not require some kind of faith. And I can't even explain that to you, right? That's from that's from my heart. That's not from my head. And how much do these feelings, these loves, worship have to do with pure reason? I'm like, I guess not. They don't have nothing to do with pure reason. Um, but this packs a punch, this line. We're not these things, a tissue out of which our lives were constructed. Like I come in here, I get to this part, I answer these questions like you did somewhere, and I'm like, my whole fabric of my being is constructed out of these things that I worshipped. And through the process that's gonna lie before us, the rest of the steps, like enable us to also tear back the tissues, the
Mhm.
layers in our makeup. Like they allow me to pull all of that back, all of those things that I've worshipped instead of worshiping this power, God. And so I really, really love that line. But it's impossible for us to say that we don't have capacity for faith. Of course, we do have capacity for faith. I look up again my own experience. I believed in myself.
Mhm.
I have the capacity for faith. So we've been living that way. It says by faith and little else. Little do I know, right? Little do I know. That's all I got.
Awesome. And that was great, Kathy. And this line just jumped out, like while we were talking about, like we obviously are able and we have the ability to have faith in something because we had faith in something. It might not have been in our higher power, but this last or the second to last line, it was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith. That's a great word. Or love or worship. We have the capacity for true love or not real love, worship, and faith. We have that ability, and thank you for pulling that out because I don't know, I hadn't seen that before, and I love how the big book meets us where we're at and it comes alive like there these all these different times. And I didn't read I've read this chapter many times, but I never saw that before. So thank you, Kathy. I'm gonna keep reading. Imagine life without faith. were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, means nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that. At least, so the chemist said. Kathy, I'm going to let you take a stab at this first.
You got some electrons going on
Yeah.
here, like, um, yeah, but like this line, imagine life without faith, were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. And that's a beautiful promise. It just wouldn't be life. Like I couldn't comprehend that. But I believed in life. Of course we did. And I definitely can't prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Now you're giving me a lot of wordy stuff here, Bill. Like my mind's going, what? And then you're talking to me about electrons create out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling around to a destiny of nothingness. And I'm like, no, like I can't say that, that it is that. And it's funny when you're reading that, I was going, when I was drinking, I was the kind of person that would argue that that was true. But I don't argue that way today, and I don't think that way today. But yeah, the electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. And I think that's pretty much I had something on this. I my other book open, but I think that's all I got.
Perfect. That was excellent. Thank you so much. I just love the first line where it says, "Imagine life without faith." I mean, imagine it for a second. What would life be like? We know that we're alive and this is life, but you know, we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove that we're like, we can't prove life, but here it is, right? This is kind of hard for me to even communicate because it's like, here we are in life. This is life, but we can't say that it's not there. But we could not prove life in the sense that you could prove a straight line. We know there's a straight line, but how do you prove it, right? I mean, I'm sure someone could like break it down and say there's all these different things that move together to create this line and all this stuff, but I mean, my regular mind that I don't break things down like that. I can't prove that it's a straight line or that it's the shortest distance between 2 points. I can't really like prove that as though I can't really prove life, right? Like it's just we have life here. And could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons? I mean, can we still say that? Can we still say that? That's like another great question. And like Kathy said, I would have been like, yeah, yes, yes, I can. Like I was the arguer. I was the one that was like, I don't know. It wasn't that I didn't believe in a higher powers. I didn't believe that the higher power was there and loved me, that cared for me. I thought that there was a higher power there for Marty and for Paul and for Kathy, and that was great. Woohoo. And like I didn't really have any interest in getting to know that higher power because the higher power I wasn't good enough for that higher power anyways. So it was like I was the argumentative type as well. Like I mean if someone said, can you still say that the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons? I would say, yeah, I could say that just because I wasn't willing to put down these old ideas that I had about my higher power, that my higher power was far from me, that was away from me, that I wasn't good enough for my higher power. I couldn't put that beside me aside from me until, I was able to walk through. And it didn't happen in step 2, to be honest. I mean, I know this is part of 2, but I was willing to take a look at this. I was willing to take a look at the old ideas and put those aside. But I didn't find, bye, Marty. I didn't find that or grasp that conception of a higher power till I had my awakening later on in the steps. It took a while. It's an experience, it's experiential. And I had to go through a lot of things, pain. I had to go through struggles and it's not like, oh, you're going to be in a lot of pain, but getting through them was where I was able to build faith. And I saw that there might be a higher power out there. I kind of just rambled, so I'm sorry. I don't know if that even made sense, but I was trying to make some sense out of this. Okay. All right. We're going to read, yeah, we're going to keep reading. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. Though it emanate from our best minds, what about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible. What did we do? We only smile. Yeah. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Here's the doubting mind again that I was just describing. That was me. Like we saw people getting set free. We saw spiritual release. We saw Ebby. We didn't get to see Ebby, but we read about Ebby and his bright eyes and like the experiences from the big book. And we were in groups and meetings and seeing people light up and be awoken, but we like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. We thought it was easier to just be like, no, that's not it. It might be good for them, but it's not good for me. It's not going to work for me. That's at least how my mind worked. Kathy, do you have any comments on this?
Um, I mean, I look at this line on the top of 55 and it says, what about people who prove that man could never fly? And like, look where we are today. Like, so like it's saying like reason isn't everything. Like, and again, I'm doing this and I realize that it's hard for my mind to comprehend. That's why we have this chapter. But this paragraph is so beautiful, this last paragraph, to see this other kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems, like people who rose above their problems, like we rise above our problems doesn't mean we don't have problems, but today I don't solve my problems. I will never be able to solve my problems. God makes that possible because I don't have the power. I can't do that. But like this line says that I only smile, we only smile. And absolutely, I would come to meetings and I would hear people talk about God, what they got through, and saying that it was all credited to God or the higher power. And I would smile and I go, you're just saying that.
Yeah.
And that's what I had when I got here because I didn't have an experience with the power. I was so agnostic, you know. Yeah, yeah, beautiful paragraph.
Beautiful paragraph. And I think we have a lot in common. I was the exact same way, like, yeah, okay. Like I'll smile and nod, but really, I didn't believe that power would work in my life. We're going to read one more paragraph and then we're going to close. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. One of my favorite lines. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. So, deep down within each of us, children, men, women, there's that fundamental idea of God. So it can be blocked. And that's the whole point of this work and going through the steps is to become unblocked and get to our higher power. Um, it may be obscured by calamity. That's another word for, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, like trauma and things that have happened in the past. By pomp, that's ego, or by worship of other things, like we were talking about before. Of course, we were worshipers. We were worshipers of the wrong things, though, or of other things. So that can also block us. But in some form or other, that fundamental idea is there somewhere. And if you think back, if when I think back on my childhood, there was glimpses, although I wasn't, I didn't really necessarily like confess believing in God. There were some times where, I was like, I like what's out there, like how did this world begin, and like I had those questions. There was a fundamental idea that there had to be something greater than myself. as I went into my addiction and came into recovery, I had to find a power greater than my substances and of myself, like self. I had to find a power greater than those things. And my fundamental idea was absolutely obscured. It was absolutely blocked. Like if a heart in the middle of a body, and we need to get, like, you think about all the arteries and the veins and stuff, the blood that flows, when it's blocked and there's that blockage, like it's like things, cholesterol, that's what I'm trying to say, cholesterol, it's blocking the blood flow through your body. And so it's like it's harder to get to the heart. And I mean, that's a physical kind of like example. That's how I look at, like, yeah, it was there, but I wasn't in touch with it because I had these I had trauma from my past. I had ego. My ego didn't look like, oh, I'm the best in the world. It was like, oh, I'm the worst in the world. And I had a really bad representation of myself. It was just like, I'm the worst. Everyone look at me because I'm so bad and blah, blah, blah. And it was obscured by those things. And I worshiped every, all other things, other people, my job, my children, drugs, alcohol. I worshiped it all. I was a worshiper, all right, just not of my higher power. All right. And Kathy, I'd love to hear your comments on this, and then you can make a closing statement if you'd like, and then we'll open up the floor for questions, answers.
Yeah, you've pretty much, covered really what I would say. I have a couple of things more, but that was beautiful. It really was. And like I know a lot of us love this paragraph, and so do I. But like I'm fooling myself. Like, I can sit and I can argue and I can be right, and I can have a lot of agnosticism, but they're telling me that deep down in every man, woman, and child is a fundamental, and fundamental just means a central primary rule or principle, which in something is based. Like this thing is, they're telling us this idea of God is true. Like they're not making this up for us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's obscured, it's concealed by these things that you mentioned. It's blocked out. And like I was just thinking of on page 13, like not to jump back, but just to say that, Bill Wilson having his spiritual experience at the end of page 12, he talks about, the moment he had needed and wanted God, and God came to him. And then it was soon blotted out by these worldly clamors, mostly within himself. And, that's what I think of here as well, that it gets blotted out by these things in me. And I am blocked when I get here. I love when you give the analogy about the heart. Um, but the beautiful thing is, it is there. And I love the end of that sentence, but in some form or other, it is there. And if I pay attention to the words, it really comes alive for me. Even though I have trauma, even though I have calamity, even though I have this pomp and this ego, and I'm less than, and I'm showing up in a way where I'm, better than you, or whatever the case may be, this pride and the worship of other things, you better believe it. Anything on the outside, looking outside of myself to fill this God-sized hole, right? To fix me. Underneath that is this fundamental idea of God. It is there, and that's what they're saying. That this faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. And I don't know about you folks, but when I came to this chapter, I was still operating on a lot of logic and a lot of like why it makes sense to believe than not to believe. And like they're telling me things like the fundamental idea, is deep down every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. I'm looking up words. What does fundamental do? I'm sticking to the facts because that's the kind of mind I had, but that was enough. That was enough for me. And to see that, faith in a power greater than sorry, my brain, in the human lives are facts as old as man himself. Fact is something known to be true. Oh, this is a fact. And that's the way I approached this kind of stuff when I got here. And that was enough for me. So I don't need to look outside of myself. What I need to do is continue to turn the pages and take the direction so I can get unblocked.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an experience with the power. I
Mm-hmm.
don't just believe, I know. And that's all I have. Thanks, Summer.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathy. That was a beautiful way of ending. Awesome job. Thank you so much for sharing your Friday night with us. I am definitely grateful and appreciative. And we will open up the floor for questions, answers, and then if you want to think of a prayer to close out, that would be great.